This episode of Mission Log is brought to you by Blue Apron, a better way to cook. Check out this week's menu and get your first 3 meals free with free shipping by going to blueapron.com/missionlog.
This episode is also brought to you by Eagle Moss and the official Star Trek Starships collection. It's the summer of Trek, and you can win a full year subscription to the Starships collection at getyourtrek.on.com/missionlog.
Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. Episode 243. Interface.
Welcome into Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm John Champion. Ken? That's your line.
Oh, I know. I was just, I was enjoying the lacuna.
You do that. Each week on Mission Log, we pick apart an episode of Star Trek, hunting down the morals, meanings, messages contained therein, and seeing if the whole thing stands a test of time.
This week, Interface, the one where Geordi's mom gets lost, but Geordi gets to play with a state-of-the-art VR rig, so it's all good. Also, Geordi sees his mom. John's got trivia coming up in just a bit, but first,
a word from Blue Apron, a better way to cook.
You must get so excited when we do these ads because you are like the foodiest foodie I know.
I love food. I think I'm not surprising our audience by saying I love food and I love to eat. Yeah. And in fact, I cooked some Blue Apron the other night. I came home really late and I was hungry and I had an early morning and I thought, you know what? I can whip this together in no time. And it was delicious. It was an endive salad with a Dijon mustard dressing and then a mushroom tartine with ricotta cheese and a fried egg. It absolutely hit the spot. And it was one of those that's so good, I would make it again on my own. But how convenient for me that I had that food already portioned out, already ready to go from Blue Apron.
And of course, the other thing is you can actually make that again because even though they're not going to send you the same ingredients to make the same thing, you get that really cool recipe card that goes with it. So you will know, even though they send you like the stuff, prepackaged, they send it measured out, but they also tell you how much you're using. So if you decide, hey, I'm going to make that whole thing again, just jot all that down on a list and go to the store and you can make it as much as you want to. Blue Apron is the #1 fresh ingredient recipe delivery service in the country. And they just, like anywhere in the continental U.S., is it anywhere? Or 99%, I think, of the continental U.S., they can take food right to your door. And it's good food because they've partnered with farms that practice regenerative farming. The meat is responsibly raised. The fish actually is being... what's the term I'm looking for? I'm sorry.
Sustainably sourced.
Thank you. That is the term.
Partnered with the Monterey Bay Aquarium, so you know that what you're getting is it is not endangered.
I mean, they're taking good care of the food that comes to you and making sure that that you can feel good about it. And of course, John says things like ricotta and endive, and you think, well, this is going to cost me a ton of money. Well, it's going to cost you something, obviously, but each one comes out to $10 per person per meal. So it's really not, you're not breaking the bank. In fact, if you go out to eat a lot, you're going to be saving money by doing this and having a good time doing it.
And let me tell you a couple of the things coming up, because this all sounds really good to me. Beef teriyaki stir fry with sugar snap peas and lime rice. 3 cheese and baby broccoli stromboli with tomato and oregano dipping sauce, and crispy salmon and roasted potato salad with pickled mustard seeds and creme fraiche sauce. This is all speaking directly to me, Ken. I'm very excited about that.
So what we would, of course, love for people to do is to check out this week's menu on their own and get your first 3 meals free with free shipping by going to blueapron.com/missionlog. You will love how good it feels and tastes to create incredible home-cooked meals with Blue Apron. So don't wait. Do it now. That's blueapron.com/missionlog. Blue Apron, a better way to cook. And a huge thanks to Blue Apron for sponsoring this week's show. John's got trivia coming up in just a moment, but first, you already did that part, didn't you?
We did. We'll do it again. We'll do it throughout the show.
That's quite all right. No, you think that should be a thing? We'll find out. Maybe it'll go hand in hand with the lacuna. I'm going to tell you how to get in touch with us. Mission Log Pod is the address to find us on Facebook, Skype, and Twitter. If you'd like to leave us a voicemail, we would love to hear your voice. 323-522-5641 is the phone number to call. 323-522-5641. Our email address is missionlog@roddenberry.com. Our show website, including discovered documents, is at missionlogpodcast.com. And please do remember, we may use your comments on an upcoming episode of Mission Log. And now, without further ado, John Champion's Trivia.
Again, today's episode, Interface, was written by Joe Menosky. And this is one of those stories that got kicked around for a number of years until they found the right fit. Let's see, at one point it would have been Riker in the suit. Remember, because he's got some daddy issues too. And but really, Riker, they determined, had been through enough already. And Geordi, maybe not quite enough. So the last script of Joe's that we discussed was Suspicions, but this one kind of went through a lot of other people on the writing staff. Rene Echeverria worked on this script as well. He was uncredited. The scene between Riker and LaForge was written by Jerry Taylor. They realized that they were running short, and then something like 3 weeks later, they just said, we should shoot something. So Jerry Taylor wrote that scene. And she is the one who pointed out that we had met family members of literally everyone else in the main cast except for Geordi. So why not give him a chance here? And Ronald D. Moore, on the other hand, not so much a fan of that idea or of this episode. Now, this was directed by Robert Weimer, and we last talked about his work in our coverage of Lessons. And you know that I love my ship names. Well, in this episode, we have the USS Raman, named after Indian physicist Sir Chandrasekhara Venkata Raman. Not bad, right? He won the Nobel Prize for Physics in 1930, having to do with his study of light-changing wavelength when going through a transparent material. Let's see, we also have the USS Hera, a name which needs no introduction, but we will anyway. Hera was the OG original goddess in Greek mythology. She's married to Zeus. She's a queen of Mount Olympus, and she's the goddess of women and marriage. Ladies and gentlemen, Hera. And just to mention a couple of other names, we have the USS Noble and our old friend, the USS Excelsior. Now let's talk about guest stars. We have Warren Munson as Admiral Holt. Warren is New York-born and has made the rounds on soap operas, TV guest roles, and feature films since the mid-'60s. Interestingly, this is his first Star Trek appearance, but it won't be his last. We will see him as another admiral in Voyager when we get to that series, and that role will, in turn, be handed over to a different actor. Madge Sinclair plays Geordi's mom, Silva LaForge, and we actually already saw Madge in Star Trek IV. She was uncredited, but she was the captain of the Saratoga. Now, Madge appeared with LeVar Burton no fewer than 4 times, but one standout, 1977's One in a Million, the Ron LaForge story, as well as in Roots. Hold that thought for just a moment, okay? She also appeared in one of my favorite comedies, John Landis's 1988 hit Coming to America. She passed away in 1995 at the age of 57. And finally, Ben Vereen plays Geordi's father, Dr. LaForge. And yeah, officially he is just Doctor, but in the Star Trek Encyclopedia, he has the name Edward. The man is a legend of stage and screen, Tony Award winner, star of TV and film, lecturer, hell of a dancer and singer. He's an ordained minister. Seriously, the guy can do it all. He was also in another of my favorite movies, All That Jazz.
See, hang on.
Yeah?
If All That Jazz is one of your favorites, how did you not say, this man is a great humanitarian? What was it? A great humanitarian. Yeah. I can't remember what the next one is. And my personal friend for over 30 years. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Ben Vereen.
That is pretty great. That's good. That's good. Yeah, everybody go see all that jazz.
Well,
the line.
Kids, ask your parents, please. In fact, kids, don't go see all that jazz, but, adults, yeah, if you haven't done it, you're missing out.
Such an awesome movie. Now, I told you a moment ago to remember that Madge Sinclair was in Roots. Okay, let's look at the family tree here that Alex Haley outlined. Madge Sinclair played Belle Reynolds, who was the grandmother of Chicken George, played by Ben Vereen. And how does LeVar fit into this, since he was nominated for an Emmy for that same show? He played Kunta Kinte, who was married to Belle Reynolds, and therefore Chicken George's grandfather, though in the timeline of the show, John Amos had assumed that role of the older Kunta Kinte.
For some reason, I have the song, I Am My Own Grandpa, stuck in my circuits.
Prologue. Geordi's playing in virtual reality in reality. He's, wait for it, interfaced with a small probe that's able to perform various functions in situations too dangerous for people. Everything he experiences through the probe is really realistic to Geordi. Probably because they can plug the interface straight into the receptors for his visor, which are plugged straight into his cerebral cortex. Also, he's wearing a bodysuit that lets him feel conditions around the probe rather than just see them. Data, Dr. Crusher, and Commander Riker have been monitoring the test of the probe interface system, and Riker deems it a success. This will apparently come in handy on Marigny 7, where the Enterprise is headed. Act 1. Marigny 7 is a gas giant planet, and the science vessel Raman is trapped in its turbulent atmosphere. The plan is to use Geordi's interface probe, survey the situation, and see what he can do about rescuing the ship and its crew. The Raman's plan had been to go deep into the planet's atmosphere, take some readings, then leave. Something must have gone wrong. They'll have to push the limits of the probe interface and Geordi's nervous system, but it should be fine. Good meeting, everybody. Now, if you'll excuse me, I got to take a call. Admiral Holt is on the line for Captain Picard. It's not a social call, though. The Hera left 9 days ago on a routine mission. 4 days ago, it disappeared without a trace. Starfleet's been looking for it for the last 3 days. It'll keep looking for another 3, but they're assuming that ship and crew are lost. That would include the ship's captain, Silva LaForge, Geordi's mom. Picard gives Geordi the news. Act 2. Geordi's watching a message from his mom from a few weeks ago. He's also beating himself up for not having responded to it. Commander Riker offers to run the probe to the Raman instead of Geordi, but Geordi won't hear it. It's his job, and besides, his mom's not dead, as far as anybody knows. She's just missing. He's the best shot at saving the Raman, so let's get to it. And they do. They're already having to push the interface to 75% of tolerance so Geordi can see. His vitals are up, but Crusher's keeping a close watch. The interior of the Raman is a mess. Geordi thinks there might be a break in the hull. He's found a guy trapped under some rubble. He can move the rubble once Data pushes the interface to 80% of tolerance. Sadly, the crewman is dead, as are the other crew members Geordi finds behind a sealed bulkhead. Suddenly there's a fire. Geordi feels it, thanks to the suit and the probe. And that's enough for Crusher. She pulls Geordi out of the interface, though when he's back to reality, all are surprised to see that his hands are actually burned. Act 3. Don't worry, there's a tech-the-tech explanation for the burns. Basically, they were running the interface tolerance so high and Geordi's response was so intense that the suit created a feedback loop. Picard still wants to retrieve the Raman and her crew, though he's worried about sending Geordi in again. Geordi and Crusher say he should be fine as long as they run the interface tolerance lower. Picard takes their word for it. The probe should be ready again in a couple of hours, giving Geordi time to call his dad. The call could have gone better. Geordi's dad is talking about a memorial service for Geordi's mom, though Geordi says until he hears definitively that his mom's dead, he's assuming she might still be found. Meanwhile, Data is studying the poetry of ancient Ducidarians. Much of their poetry contains lacunae, or empty spaces. These can last minutes or days. Observers are encouraged to really grok the emptiness of the experience. Data is in the midst of a 47-minute lacuna when Geordi stops by to say hi. Really? Say hi? Do you not want to talk about your mother? Asked Data. Nope, says Geordi. Really? Asked Data. Really? Says Geordi, who then proceeds to chastise Data for not pushing hard enough on whether Geordi wants to talk about his mother, because of course he does. If he was looking for consolation, Geordi's come to the wrong guy, because Data's not a guy, he's an android. No, Geordi, you're not crazy for thinking your mom might be alive, but you're probably wrong. Enjoy the lacuna. Back now to the interface, this time with a low level of tolerance, just barely enough for Geordi to see his mom on the Raman. Act 4. Geordi's mom seems as surprised to see Geordi as he is to see her. Also, she says they have to go down to the surface. We're dying, she says. We need your help. I need your help. Of course, back on the Enterprise, Dr. Crusher and Data are only hearing Geordi's half of the conversation. They're about to pull him out of the interface when Geordi goes limp. The interface cutoff was automatically activated when Geordi, in probe form, reached for his mother and sort of overloaded. The real Geordi is in neural shock. Naturally, he's fine in the next scene, though Crusher says she wouldn't want to subject him to that again. Picard is curious about what caused Geordi's hallucination, though Geordi's all, it wasn't a hallucination, it was my mom. Kind of. Data says there was no other human on board the Raman, and Geordi agrees. The Hera is on the surface. They must have found a way to broadcast up to the Raman, just as the Enterprise was broadcasting down. Dr. Crusher tosses a lot of medical jargon Geordi's way. Basically, she thinks he saw his mom, but that was probably just his brain trying to make sense of stuff, not his actual mom. Data says even if the Hera is on the planet's surface, it couldn't stand the atmospheric pressure. All that's enough for Picard. He is not letting Geordi go in again. He orders Data to find another way to save the Raman, and he orders Geordi to talk with Counselor Troy. Deanna has a theory. Geordi doesn't want to believe that his mom is dead, so his brain is showing him his mom in need of help. He figures his brain would show him his mom safe and sound, but Deanna counters, if it did that, the ride would be over, and he'd have to accept that his mom was gone. The harder it is to save her, the more complex the situation, the longer he can believe she's still alive. Not surprisingly, Geordi disagrees, though his counter theory is very complex. The Hera had a sort of hotshot young engineer that was always tweaking stuff. What if a particular experiment interacted with the Hera's drive to create a sort of subspace funnel that ended with the Hera on the surface of Meridian 7? Data says that that's technically possible, but nearly impossible. So they'll not be going back for the Hera. They'll use a couple of shuttles to pull the Raman up instead. Picard tells Geordi that he feels for him, but his mind's made up. He cannot let Geordi risk his life on a dubious hypothesis. Riker has a bit of sharing time with Geordi. You know, he had a hard time accepting the death of his own mother. Thanks? Geordi makes a legit point. In the case of Riker's mom, there was a body. In the case of Geordi's mom, there's just mystery. Also, he's talked to someone on the Raman who looks and sounds like his mom, calling herself his mom, so this might be a little different. You'll never guess what happens next. Geordi goes to power the probe interface on his own. Data figured he would, and he comes to stop him. You'll never guess what happens next. Data helps Geordi do what he's got to do. Data does have one request, though. Consider the possibility that what you see on the Raman is not real. Geordi promises he will. Act 5. Back on the Raman, and there's Geordi's mom. She says she's not actually there. She's broadcasting up from the surface. As for how they got there, she explains. The Hera had a hotshot young engineer that was always tweaking stuff. A particular experiment interacted with the Hera's drive to create a sort of subspace funnel that ended with the Hera on the surface of Meridian 7. And Geordi's like, wow, that is almost exactly word for word what I was just saying on the Enterprise a little while ago. Now he's got a plan to start some sort of something that'll basically end with the Hera back where it started a few days ago. All of that starts by taking the Raman lower into the planet's atmosphere. Data says he may not be able to bring the Raman back from that, but he has to try. Of course, the further the probe moves from the Enterprise, the more Data has to increase the gain, otherwise Geordi will lose contact. And, of course, when he gets low enough, there's no sign of the Hera. Also, Picard and Crusher are wise to the caper being pulled by Geordi and Data. They come up with a plan to bring Geordi out safely, though he argues he's not talking to his mother. It turns out that the being Geordi is talking to is a life form native to Merigny 7. They live in a lower level of the atmosphere. When the Raman dipped low for readings, the life forms were accidentally picked up. When the Raman went higher, they were trapped, in danger, dying. They did kill the Raman's crew, though it was apparently an accident. Geordi explains all of this to Picard. He needs to take the Raman lower to save these intelligent beings. When they're low enough, the beings do leave the Raman, with the one who appeared to be Geordi's mom telling Geordi goodbye. Luckily, Crusher's found a way to safely pull Geordi out of the interface, like a decompression chamber for his brain. While Picard is likely happy that Geordi is recovered, he is not happy. The actions of this week's episode will go into the engineer's permanent record. On a personal note, Picard says he's sorry that Geordi didn't find his mother, though Geordi says the interaction with the alien was so real, he feels like he had a chance to say goodbye. The end.
Deep Space 3. There's so many deep spaces out there. We haven't counted yet. I'm going to say there might be 47 of them.
Good Lord. Well, no, I mean, because here's the thing. We've talked about this. I know novels, not novels, whatever. But in an alternate timeline, Riker actually ends up the commander of Deep Space 86.
Whoa.
So at least in, I don't know if novels count as canon or not. We don't talk about the novels, generally speaking. But
we don't talk about canon either, because...
No, well then, to heck with it. There are at least 86 of them. I know there are at least 86 because I read about it in a book one time.
Cool. Well, hey, only 83 more to go.
Yeah. Hey, so I have a question. Who among senior staff should actually still have a job aboard the Enterprise? The only one I can think of is Riker. And I may be forgetting something here, all right? And I'm including Picard in this, I think, as well. Because, I mean, I love Picard's redemption after Locutus.
Yeah.
But would he really be allowed to command the Enterprise again after being taken over by the Borg and costing the Federation, I'm going to guess, 47 starships?
I'm going to say no. He probably needs a desk job.
Yeah. He would probably be bumped up to Admiral, honestly, because you know how useless they tend to be.
Yep.
They had an Admiral call the captain to let him know that a ship was missing.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, so they're really up to like a lot of top-notch, heavy lifting. So here's the thing. Crusher stole a shuttle and flew it into a sun, of course, like you do.
Like you do. Yeah.
Geordi did the thing with the probe in this episode, right? Lost them the Raman. Now, I understand he ended up saving some other things, but he lost them the Raman based on nothing but what seemed like a hallucination. Right. Data's hijacked the Enterprise more times than I can remember.
It's like every other week.
Yeah, and Worf straight up killed a guy in front of Riker one time. I know
had it coming.
Heat of battle. Yeah, no, I mean, the guy, he probably visited Talos 4 at some point. He needed to die, apparently. But yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of, like, would anybody... Now, is there something I'm forgetting about Riker? Oh, and I guess Troy actually gets to stay put, too. Because I don't think she's done anything that would actually cost her job to this point. Well, no, because that was Man of the People. It wasn't her fault. She was actually taken over by somebody in something.
You know, I think that after 12 years of this mission, I say they all get back to Earth and there's somebody, some admiral, I'm sure, or maybe a Commodore, who's reading the records of what happened on the Enterprise and just aghast at this crew. And they're all just sort of like, what, you mean this isn't normal? That this thing doesn't, I mean, people don't take over their own ships all the time and fly shuttles into suns? What do you mean?
Listen here, you desk jockey. You haven't been out in space in a very long time. Well, I mean, except here we are on Deep Space 3, so okay, you're in space, but still. Yeah.
Geordi has this great line. He says he's talking about in the VR suit, all the stimulation that he's getting from that. It's like being on a roller coaster or a first date. And I'm thinking, like a first date where it's fun and I'm not totally creeping someone out. I mean, is that what dates are like? Because I wouldn't know.
Yeah, it's interesting because he said it was like being on a first date, and I half expected Dr. Crusher to say, and you know a lot about first dates.
Right.
First
right.
dates.
Yes, first. And there.
Does it count if there's no second, though? Is it a first date at that point, or is it just a date?
It's just a date.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Okay, so maybe he thinks he doesn't know anything about a first date because he's rarely been on a second.
Yeah. The poor Hera. I'm thinking we should obviously be concerned that anyone or any ship would just disappear. But honestly, it seems like this kind of thing happens all the time in the world of Star Trek. There's a lot of attention around this. Clearly, we know why. It's part of the story in this one. But it does seem like on any other week, the fact that a ship is missing is just sort of like the throwaway line to get the other action started.
See, I'm not sure that that's actually a ship being destroyed. I would say that that's the case, but I don't remember a ship just like, oh yeah, now we don't know what happened to that one. I mean, that really is it. And then you're only talking about what? I mean, so presumably they knew where they were going, right?
Right.
Which means they would probably know about how they were going to get there. Mm-hmm. And we're talking about, so they disappeared 4 days ago. Starfleet's been looking for them for 3 days. Mm-hmm. They're going to look for 3 more days. That means like 1 week.
Yeah.
That's the total amount of time they're going to take to look for this ship before they're like,
Yep.
Look, space is big. I mean, we can't.
Right.
How, really big, actually. You just wouldn't believe how mind-bogglingly big space is. That's for you Hitchhikers fans right there. That's what that is.
That was good. I'm sure that they registered a flight plan before they left.
Yeah, you'd think, wouldn't you? You'd think.
And you can only veer from that so much.
Right.
So
it is. Yeah. I understand that it's for the story, but I'm a little bothered by how quickly they're like, well, they're probably gone. Like, really? Right. And we're not going to look. We're not going to check. We're not going to, because they might have created a subspace funnel, which
yeah, right. Oh, yeah.
Guess that happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you imagine? Like, just I don't know. It's weird to think what might be happening to that ship that just inexplicably disappeared, right?
Don't want to know.
Like, are they like making their way like from like a whole other quadrant of the galaxy, maybe back to the Federation? Is that possible?
Wait a minute.
Could something like that ever even happen?
It would take decades.
That may or may not be a good basis for a show. I'm not sure. Yeah.
Shelve that. We'll come back to it.
Maybe we will. Hey, Geordi says the warp core in the Hera has a reputation for strange side effects. Sorry, my hand is up here in the back. I have a question.
Yep.
Why is Starfleet using warp cores with strange side effects?
I think that's a legitimate question to ask.
Thank you,
Ken.
Thank you. I appreciate
I wish somebody
that.
had an answer for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if I'm looking at all the ships lined up, and somebody says, "Okay, we're going to assign you to a ship," I'm going to say, "Let me take the one that the warp core works totally normally." Right. That's the one that I'll take.
Yeah. This one's small, but the engine's iffy. Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. Well,
yeah.
I'm thinking a desk job might not be the worst thing now that you mention it. Speaking of desk jobs, it's not a desk thing, but you're an interior design guy.
Yeah, I do love design.
Almost as much as you're a foodie.
Almost, not quite, but yeah.
Boy, is Deanna's office ugly in this episode. I mean, just ugly. UGLY, there is absolutely no alibi. It's ugly. So many sponge patterns and pastels going on in here. And like that sectional. Is she doing like counseling for a family of 8? I mean, it's like... It's not even normally where she is. I don't know where they are in this. It feels like the waiting room of a 24th century Olive Garden or something.
Yeah, it was. Here's the thing. I avoided writing anything down about that because I knew I would just go on and on and on.
Well, sorry then.
Oh, no. Now you got me started. So, buckle up.
It's not. We should actually, it's not important. It's just bad.
Here's why it stands out. This episode actually has a lot of really nice photography and a lot of nice production design in it. Mm-hmm. There are shots of Geordi as the probe that are these long Steadicam shots, and you have this dark, mysterious lighting. And for some reason, they go into Deanna's room, which looks terrible. I mean, it is right up there with that bad season 1 wallpaper, that level of terrible, but it's shot in a really flat way where it's like a Universal Studios production from 1978 where everything is just super white lighting, very flat. And there's one shot where Geordi is just sort of standing straight on with his back to the wall. And it might as well be color forms at that point. It's bad.
I would be
bad.
Really curious to know why that ended up being the set, how that ended up being the set. I mean, and that's for like a level of nerd that's beyond nerd. Because, I mean, you've got to be talking about something. Yeah. I don't remember. It's been a long time. Maybe the bridge of the Romulan ship is the last time there were so many questionable design choices. But at least the bridge of the Romulan ship, at the very least there, you could say, okay, well, that's weird art direction, but at least the shots were okay.
Yeah, sure.
This was not pretty.
Yeah. It was an unholy combination. So I'm sure that we'll talk a bit about the VR contrivance in this episode. And I understand doing things for dramatic effect. So it was an interesting choice to have Geordi as Geordi and without the visor to tip you off that this is VR Geordi, not real Geordi. So I understand that idea, but why would Geordi as the probe be able to have a conversation with his mother that the people on the Enterprise couldn't hear? Because that raises this whole other question about how is he interfacing with that probe? If he thinks it, does the probe say it? But then there are other things that he says as the probe that people in the VR room can hear because he's talking to them. So not entirely consistent in that, but it did make me say, okay, well, he's having this whole conversation, but nobody on the other end can hear it. So who is actually having that conversation? Because if he can think it and the probe can say it, that's pretty outstanding.
That is pretty cool, but then he's just... Well, that's a really long lacuna then for anybody who's in the interface room with him.
Yes. Yeah. You raised some interesting questions, and I'm going to do that. I'm going to raise my hand at the back of the class and say, why would Data, in his right state of mind, which he is in this episode, he hasn't been taken over by lore or anything else, why would Data violate protocol and help Geordi? Does friendship override his logic? Because he knows it's wrong. He knows he's going to get in trouble. He knows Geordi will get in trouble. But is he just a softie at this point? Is he just a softie because his friend is hurt?
Well, I mean, he actually does present an interesting point to Geordi. He says, I cannot have you confined to quarters for something you have not yet done. Now, I know that's just Data sort of like giving himself an out so that he can help Geordi's plan of action. I will say, though, when he uttered those words, I thought, Kirk might actually have a shot. Kirk's word jujitsu, where he would just where he would like shut down like a planet-sized computer or whatever. Yeah. I mean, maybe Data says that out loud to Kirk, and he's like, "Well, hang on, you're right."
And it's like, not so fast.
Right, and then Data's head just pops off because he can he can draw the whole thing out and realize, well, that's what's going to happen anyway, so I might as well go ahead and pop it off now.
Yeah. See, not that long ago, we saw Crusher in a position where she was stripped of her rank and she was getting help kind of on the down low. So I could see, seeing as how Dr. Crusher was the other one helping Geordi with the VR rig, that she would actually do something like that. It would make a lot of sense for her. She's emotionally, bonded to her fellow crewmates, and this is something that was done for her, so she might be kind of paying it forward to Geordi. Data had a little more trouble with.
Okay, now see, we're going to have to do that thing, unfortunately.
Oh no, really? Okay.
Well, we do. We have to because Riker's whole thing where he was like, my mom, blah 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 blah, and that's really how that scene played for me, was blah 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 blah. If you actually want it to be Crusher who's helping Geordi, then she can talk about how difficult it was when she heard that Jack was dead. And for those days until they brought him back, she kept holding out hope that, maybe there was this, or maybe there was that, or maybe there was the other. Because you're right, logically, there's no way Data should be doing this unless they're trying to make us ask again whether or not Data has emotion, which we're not going to do.
Nope.
Yeah, had they done that with Crusher, that would have actually been quite compelling, or potentially quite compelling. But, they took a different road.
Yep.
The lacuna, in Deucedarian poetry, is the artistic version of a page that says, intentionally left blank. Also, intentionally left blank is my missing persons cover band.
Hey, we've almost arrived at that segment of the show where we get into the deep discussion about the morals, meanings, and messages. But first...
But middle... It's time for a word. Because we did but first at first, you see.
Okay, but I thought this was going to be a show full of but firsts.
No, but middle. It's time to talk about the Eagle Moss Starship Collection because you know why. It's the summer of Trek.
That's right. So they're marking the launch of the 100th vessel. You remember it, Ken? It's the USS Horizon, which
yes.
I love. Yeah, so it's the 100th vessel in the official Star Trek Starships collection. And Eagle Moss, of course, is inviting fans from across the generations, yeah, I said that, to get your Trek on in the Summer of Trek sweepstakes. And you can check it out at getyouRtrekOn.com/mission log. Tell them what they can win, Ken.
Well, lots of different things, right? I mean, grand prize winners will get a full 1-year subscription to the Starships collection, which is kind of awesome. So that's what? That would be like 24 ships, right? Because it's 2 a month. So 24 tiny little starships can be yours just for going there and entering. Other winners will get selections of those models, plus graphic novels, digital comics, all kinds of stuff. We said this the last time we talked about it. Literally hundreds of prizes available.
You've heard us talk so excitedly, genuinely, about how much we love the official Star Trek Starships collection from Eagle Moss. We encourage you to check them out, but this is your chance. This is your chance to go win something incredibly cool from them, and you can do that at getyourtrekon.com/mission log. That address one more time, getyourtrekon.com/mission log.
Go there and check it out. Seriously. The quality of this stuff is just nuts. Like, it's nuts. And it's affordable, too. That's the other thing. I mean, like, you look at it and you're like, well, I could never afford something like that. And it turns out you could. So, yeah, check out what they've got. But, don't even think about the price right now because it's your chance to win. As John said, getyourtrekon.com/mission log. And we do thank Eagle Moss for sponsoring this episode of Mission Log.
All right, Ken, let's talk about how cool the probe idea is in this episode. Yeah, I said cool. I said cool because we always wondered why on Star Trek they didn't have more robots or remote devices. Like let's say your second in command leaves the bridge to go fix a radiation problem in the engine room. Mm-hmm. You don't want that to happen. You would rather have a robot or a probe or some sort of remote device go do that because you don't want to lose a valuable member of your crew. So it just seems like you would have this kind of thing everywhere. So I like the idea that this episode is taking on that challenge. Now, question, does it make any sense to have that thing tied into someone's nervous system? So isn't this the whole idea of personal safety by using a probe? Now, I do realize that Geordi's eyes make him a unique candidate because you can feed the video information directly into his head. But shouldn't there just be people monitoring information rather than trying to feel it? So one way I might say that there's a bad idea here is there should probably not be a thing that generates that much heat on Geordi's hands.
Well,
let's
there wasn't anything that generated that much heat on Geordi's hands. It created a tech-to-tech loop of some sort.
It did.
Yeah, that was a mistake because he actually didn't have anything on his hands.
No, it showed that there are wires on top, and then all of a sudden he's got burned hands underneath.
Right. It's actually kind of odd, actually, because he uses his hands to pick things up, but he does not have any sensory suit over his hands. Gloves, you would have thought, would be the easiest part of that suit to make.
Right. You would think that, yeah.
See, here's the thing. I love that you think this is cool. I'm having a bit of problem with it because, I mean, I jokingly said that it's a VR rig. But it really is a VR rig, and that's great, except we've already got the best VR rig imaginable in the holodeck.
Yes.
And we also know that the holodeck can jack straight into your neural cortex, and you don't even need to have visors or implants for visors. Just ask Lieutenant Barclay. Because this happened. I can't remember which episode that was, but he basically just did a complete interface with the Enterprise computer.
The nth degree he did that.
Is that the one?
And yeah, it is the one. Yeah. And that would be ideal because you have the Enterprise in real time creating that environment for you. And all you would need is to place cameras and whatever other probes on that other ship. Now, we do know that the holodeck also will try to kill you. Given a lack of safety protocols, which they're always going to push. But I thought, okay, picture this in the modern world. So everyone at Mission Control for a NASA probe, like let's say the one on Mars. Okay, so now you have specialists reading every bit of information from temperature to lighting to environmental objects, whatever is in the probe's way, to gases on Mars. So let's say that next time, instead of a bunch of scientists sitting around reading all of that on a monitor, when it's dark, we turn off all the lights. If it's sulfur that the probe encounters, we make it smell terrible for the scientists who are looking at that information. And then the guy who reads the temperature, just put him in a really cold room and let him try to experience it for himself.
All right. See, I think there's actually something to this. I just have a problem with the whole suit thing. And I can't help wondering if it's like, because this was 93, right?
Yeah.
All right. So virtual reality is still hot in like 93. Virtual reality is a new idea. I mean, it honestly struck me like this almost felt like they wanted to show something really neat that was kind of going on right now. And so they put him in this VR suit, which we were seeing in all, kinds of horrible movies in the early 1990s.
For
right.
sure.
But I mean,
yes.
it was a neat sort of like, hey, this is a place where science is going. The only problem is we're on a ship that's got 4 holodecks. I mean, they've already done like way past virtual reality. You could say they've done virtual reality to the nth degree, if you wanted to be, cute about it. Well, thank you very much. I mean, it's not. I'm sorry to solve the technical problems, but this is a technical problem that was solved when we were on the first episode. When we were in Encounter at Farpoint, when we come across Data in the holodeck and he's whistling and the holodeck is completely real, then why do I need to tie into a probe that goes down someplace? Why not just have that send all the information back up to the ship and like render it in the holodeck? And then a bunch of us could be there actually looking around as opposed to one guy.
Right. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, it absolutely. No, that's.
It would be like if somebody came and said, Captain, I have invented a way for us to go warp 3.
Yeah, right.
And Picard's like, dude, we got a warp core.
This one goes to 11.
We can go like warp 9 point something maybe. We don't try to get all the way to 9.9 because then we end up going back in time or something weird. But opening up a wormhole of our own apparently. But I mean, it's just it's. I mean, I'm not going to say that the entire episode was undone by that, but it struck me as odd that it's like here's this new thing we've got that's really kind of a crappy version of this other thing that we already had. But yeah, let's play with it anyway.
Yeah. It's well. We will come back to that in our wrap-up, I'm certain of it. Let's talk about Geordi's journey in this episode. So there is... See, here's the thing. You talked about how you didn't like the scene with Riker. I think the scene with Riker is perfectly fine. And I also like that scene with Data asking Geordi if he needs to be comforted. And then Geordi's very human process in that scene, which is saying no... and then yes, because sometimes when you don't want to talk about the thing, you really need to talk about the thing. And it's uncomfortable, but that's what he needed. I felt like that was a genuine moment.
Yeah. All right, I'm just going to be the negative Ned.
No, you disagree.
I'm going to be the negative Ned all the way through this episode. I have a problem with, once again, we are teaching Data bad things about humanity, it seems to me. Some really terrible stuff about humanity. So Data asked, hey, do you want to talk about it? And Geordi's like, no, I don't want to talk about it. And then Data's like, really? Because it would make sense if you wanted to talk about it. And Geordi's like, no, I really don't want to talk about it. And then Data's like, all right, well, let's talk about this poem I'm reading or not reading, while I'm waiting for the poem to start again. And then and Geordi's like, well, you gave up too easily there, Data. Really, what you should have done was press me to ask if I wanted to talk about it. Okay, well, dude, I asked you, and I asked you again. I mean, there are ways that scene could have gone okay to me. It was the part where Geordi chastised Data for it. I think that bothers me. Because, personal aside, if you don't actually want to know how I'm doing, don't ask me. Because I don't tend to say fine unless I'm actually fine. And then this happens seriously wherever I am. I actually had a guy, a cashier, ask me how I was doing. And I told him. And he was like, wow, you're honest. And I'm like, well, you asked. Dude, what? Yeah. So, I mean, it really bothered me for Geordi to... Because Data actually did a very human thing there. He said, are you okay?
Yeah.
And Geordi said, yes. And Data actually then said, are you sure? And Geordi said, yeah, lay off.
Yeah.
And Data's like, all right, cool, man. And then Geordi's like, well, you're really bad at this human thing because I totally need you to ask a third time.
Which... may be exactly what it takes, and that's what it took. So I look, I'm going to cut him some slack. The guy is going through an emotional thing.
Yeah, okay, yes, but the writers weren't. That's my problem that I'm having. Anyway, go ahead. Yeah. I'm sorry, I don't know if the writers are going through an emotional thing or not, but yeah, I mean, they're... Yeah. I don't know why. I don't know. I don't want to jump to the end. I apparently had a couple of problems with this episode, John.
That's fine. That's fine. Do you want to talk about it?
No, I'm good.
Okay, you sure you don't want to talk about it? Because it sounds like you want to talk about it.
Okay, I really don't want to talk about it, so don't ask me again, maybe.
Cool, then I'm just going to move on with my other point.
Dude, I totally want to talk about this. What's wrong with you?
God,
okay, go ahead.
I'm
sorry. Yeah, no. Go ahead. Yeah.
There's... obviously, there's debatable stuff about this episode and the premise of the episode, but I'm really glad that we have this as a Geordi episode because it only took 7 seasons, but I feel like we actually know a little more about Geordi, or even if we don't know more about him, we gave him some depth. We gave him a family. We gave him things to feel regret about. We got that early on with Picard. We got that early on with Riker, to, varying degrees of success. And that's fine, but at least they attempted, at least they went there. I wonder if we would have felt differently about Geordi, and particularly his, let's say, other personal problems, had this episode or an episode like it had come earlier. Where we set up, we give Geordi some stuff to deal with. And then does that influence our perception of him, and does that influence the writers as we go forward, where it's not just like, all right, who's this loser who's creeping out all the women? Yeah. So I'm glad that we got that, because up until now we've had quite a bit of the Picard show. And I was just talking to a friend of mine who is a listener, hi Dan, who was complaining that to him it's becoming a lot of the Data show. And I was really glad to come across something that didn't purely focus on them and just gave a little something more to Geordi, but I wish that we had gotten it before. And I do like that this is an episode that gives us another look at grief. Although I wonder if everyone sort of dismisses Geordi's state a little bit. Look, we don't break the timeline here ever, not in a million years. But I would say that maybe very soon we're going to have a very different approach when we suspect that one of our main characters is dead. And I felt like in this, they were very eager to say, yeah, look, Geordi, she's gone. You need to get over it. And even though there was some sensitivity, at least saying, hey, go to Counselor Troy, she's expecting you. Even Counselor Troy is sort of questioning, well, are you doing all this because you want to believe this? So it bothered me a little bit, but I also understood the reality of it. Well,
I mean, I may want to go back to what happened a minute ago with Data.
Yeah.
Riker comes in and immediately he's like, listen, if you want to take some time, And he says, no, I'm good. And so really, until he starts exhibiting signs otherwise, you go ahead and take him at his word, I guess. I don't know. People do that, right? I mean, people deal with grief different ways, including sometimes not dealing with it at all. There's a thing that happened recently. Whatever. A director of a major motion picture, his daughter, I believe it was, killed herself right before the motion picture started. And so what did he do? He went ahead and directed the picture, except they got to the last months of shooting, and then he was like, you know what? Maybe this was not the best idea I ever had. Maybe I needed to go ahead and do something else. But here's the thing. They went ahead and let him go ahead and run this multi-million-dollar, extravaganza dealing, in the height of his grief. And yet that's something that we'll do. I mean, I've known people who go back to work the next day after someone passes away because it's what they know how to do. They want things to be as normal as they possibly can be, right? And usually a day or two later, they're like, whoa, that was a bad idea. I'm going to take some time off now. So, I don't know. I mean, at the very least, they did pay lip service to it initially. I mean, Riker did say, listen, I can take care of this. But of course, it actually does go to the thing that Troy said, right? Like, if he stops and thinks about it, then he's really going to have to think about it. So he's just not going to do that. He's going to assume that everything's going to be fine until somebody hands him definitive proof otherwise.
Yeah. And I think that I fully agree with the idea that he's saying, look, I need to seek this thing out until I have definitive proof. Mm-hmm. Look, this is Star Trek. A weird thing happens to these people every week. A starship disappearing is a weird thing, and they're ready to say, yeah, boy, that's weird. Too bad she's gone. Now we need to move on. And you need to deal with it.
Can we get to something that I would love to deal with?
I would love to, yes.
The lacunae.
Oh, you want to take a 47-minute break?
Could we? I didn't know it was an actual thing. I didn't know that lacuna was an actual word. I assumed that they were making up, because who was it? The Ducidarians? The ancient Ducidarians. Yes. It's that poetry?
Yeah, that's made up.
I'm pretty sure that's made up. I didn't know that a lacuna was an actual thing. And then when I was typing it in for the recap, and there was no red squiggly line under it, I was like, what? And so I went and checked, and yeah, it pretty much means what Data said, except the idea of using it, I mean, it's not an artistic term necessarily. It's just a void or a gap or silence or something along those lines. And so the idea of the Ducidarians using it as making a point of being silent, I mean, it has to do with sort of like the whole mindfulness idea that we have currently, right? If you're eating, really eat. Don't eat and watch TV. For God's sake, don't eat at your desk. Don't eat while you're walking someplace. If you eat, eat. If you're eating, rather eat. If you're walking, walk. And really just sort of like experiencing the emptiness, I believe is what Data called it. And I got to say, I absolutely love the idea. It struck me as a really wonderful moment, and kind of an artistic thing to throw in there as well, because that's basically what everyone is suggesting Geordi do, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you don't know what's going on, but deal with that right now. Deal with this loss, or deal with this potential loss. Deal with this silence. It struck me as a neat artistic idea.
Yeah, it's the poetic equivalent of 4 minutes, 33 seconds. And that's for all you John Cage fans out there who are listening to our show.
Yeah, all 8. John had to explain that to me earlier, so I'm sorry. I've been sworn to secrecy. I now know what 4 minutes, 33 seconds is. And if you want to, you'll apparently have to look it up. Good news, though. You can download it on iTunes.
Mm-hmm. You can.
Weirdest $1.29 you'll ever spend.
With the Hera gone and the Raman gone, it is time to see what we can see in Interface.
Lacuna Matata.
What a wonderful phrase.
Lacuna Matata. Ain't no pass and craze. It means.
Good.
That's exactly.
That was perfect.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. 2 shows nightly, except for the days that I do 4. Hey, it's time for the part of the show where we discuss the messages, morals, and meanings of the episode we have covered and decide for ourselves and, chip into the conversation that maybe you guys are having as well, whether the episode stands the test of time. The episode in question this week is Interface. Hey, John, does Interface hold up as far as you're concerned?
So this is one of the more interesting episodes to try to answer that question, as we do every week. So we gave a lot of stuff a pass with the original series because we're watching it at such a distance, more than 40 years when we started that part of our journey. And we kind of chalk it up to saying, well, that's how TV was made then. And so we focus on story, direction, acting, whatever else we're going to focus on. This episode is partly about a piece of technology that is becoming more of a reality today. It was starting to become a reality when this episode was made, and in the couple of decades since, even more so, and it will only continue to grow, and we will see this as a real thing. And you can't separate that from the story. It is a major part of that story.
You know what's hilarious about that?
What's that?
Had we been doing this show in 2005, we'd probably be like, virtual reality.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
Right. How do you like that big suit? Oh, I wish he'd had the helmet.
Yeah, right.
And now we're like, oh, yeah, this is totally happening. I can totally see that.
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of funny.
Right.
Because it was like totally in favor when this episode came out. Totally fell out of favor. Became like a laughingstock, a joke. And now we're like, oh, yeah, I'm thinking about getting me one of them virtual realities.
Yeah, right. So as a production here, I like the production techniques. I like having Geordi there instead of the probe, which was kind of cool. We saw it in Reflection, and that was partly a budget concern. Well, you're going to put the actor there instead of trying to put an effect there every single time. Like I said, I liked a lot of the Steadicam that they used in this. And there is something about the bare bones of the story that does hold up. It's about Geordi's journey. And all of that I found interesting. Problem is that, can you even call it a B-plot? I don't know. At the end, the thing with the aliens, the big reveal, it just feels very rushed. Almost felt like there should have been another scene there for a show that was running short already. I give it just maybe just a marginal pass. I don't want to dismiss this episode because we get something more about Geordi. And I think that's important. But the sort of machinations of the episode really don't hold up. So I'm just going to go with if it's a 50-50 proposition, I'm going to give it a 51% pass. How about you?
No, I don't like it.
Okay.
I mean, I just don't. I mean, because, again, you're right, it is about technology, but somebody on the writing staff should have said, hang on, we've got this technology already. So what is it that we're doing with this guy? And we've actually done this before, again, with Barclay, as you pointed out, in the Nth Degree. I pointed out Barclay, but I couldn't remember the name. So thank you very much for that. I did like something that you said earlier when you said you wish we had seen this earlier. Because again, not unlike last week's episode, I think it was last week, this felt very much to me like a season 1, maybe season 2 episode of Next Gen. And this would have been a great season 1 or season 2 episode of Next Gen because we have these aliens that like, oh, we accidentally picked them up and they need our help thing. And then we've also deepened Geordi's character because you're right. So far, all Geordi has been is the guy who's hard on Barclay or the guy who can't ever do well with the ladies. I mean, these are the only two things we've ever had about him.
Yeah.
And so to deepen, and his best friends are all imaginary. That's the other thing, or they're not real. I mean, there's Data, there was Leah Brahms, I can't remember who the other one was, but there was a third one that I was like, these are all made up people that he's bonding with. And you can then go back and ask, okay, so he feels the need to unburden himself emotionally. Of course, he goes to the machine to do that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we've accidentally learned stuff about Geordi, like the fact that he can't make real friends. They all have to be imaginary. But aside from that, this would have been a great thing to see in season 1 or season 2 to give that character more depth. And then we could maybe refer back to it every second or third season, like we refer back to Riker's dad issues every second or third season. I think where I get a real problem with this, and it's the same thing that we've talked about before, what I want my Star Trek to do is present me with moral dilemmas or tell me a longer story. Now, what I'd prefer is the moral dilemmas. I would rather have Arena, which is the season 1, I believe, episode of the original series where we meet the Gorn. Or I would rather have, well, we'd always rather have the Corbomite maneuver. I'd rather have Time Squared. I'd rather have something that gives me personally something to consider. Watching a character go through character development, knowing that next week he is not going to remember that this happened, or probably not going to remember that this happened. I mean, we may have a reference. I assume, it's Ben Vereen. I have not watched ahead, and it's been years since I've seen it originally, so I don't know if Ben Vereen's going to turn up again. My assumption is we're going to discuss Geordi's mom at least one more time. But this is not something that's going to affect him week to week.
No, of course. Yeah.
I don't really know why we do the character development stories if we're not going to carry the character development further. And in the meantime, and I know this is a complaint that I had towards the end of season 6, we're now under 25 episodes left of Star Trek The Next Generation. Please don't waste them on emotional development that we know is not actually going to affect the character and hitting issues that you've hit harder before in different ways. I go back to Half a Life, the one with Timothy, the guy who was 60, who, it's time for him to die, even though he's got more stuff to do. We dealt with real grieving there. We dealt with the fact that, his daughter was concerned that she wouldn't know how to grieve if he didn't do everything that he was supposed to do the way he was supposed to do it. Yes, you get some stuff out of Geordi here as far as like, I'm not going to deal with this until I have to deal with it. But guess what? At the end of the episode, there's still no body. There's still no Hera. There's still no answer. But I got to talk to somebody who sort of looked like my mom, and they said goodbye, so I guess I feel okay about it now. The end.
Okay, that was weird. Yes.
It was, we got to wrap this up really quickly. We're not going to make this a 2-part episode, and Lord knows we're not going to continue because we have no idea who's going to write next week's episode anyway. And they certainly didn't know that we were going to kill Geordi's mom in this episode when they started writing next week's episode. So, it carries with it all the trappings of gravitas, but this is not a show that does that. And so then when you try to tell me, oh, let's be sad for Geordi this week, but don't worry about it because there'll be no reason to be sad for him next week, so it's all good. It just, I wish it worked for me. I really do wish it worked for me because I'm tired of being the guy for the past, 3 or 4 episodes to say, no. But unfortunately, I feel like I have to say no. That doesn't mean there aren't messages here. What messages did you pick up, sir?
Yeah, well, the whole thing is this exploration of grief and character and, how Geordi is going to deal with this. There is also a message in there about the enemy not being the enemy, one of those classic tried and true Star Trek messages. There's sort of LaForge dealing with the reality of loss, which came a bit from that Riker scene that I liked a bit more than you did. There's grappling with regret and sort of seizing the moment that we discuss in the LaForge and Troy scene, which I thought was just a very real reaction to this. We prefaced it with Geordi watching that message from his mother and then talking about how he hadn't been in touch with her in 3 weeks. So this is all real and relatable stuff. And there's another message in there. Don't be too quick to believe what you want to believe. Data says it outright to Geordi when he's about to go in for the last time. Consider the possibility that what you see isn't real. A valuable lesson to be expressed by Data, and particularly to Geordi in this case, who so wants to see something, so wants to believe something, that he will see it no matter what. Yeah. So what else? Anything else in there?
Well, let me really quickly say, because I don't know if I said it well, the thing that bothers me about the conversation between Riker and LaForge is it feels to me like Riker is doing 2 things in that situation that you're not supposed to do. And this is just based on, different counseling stuff that I've heard in some classes I took a million years ago. You don't say, I know how you feel, and you don't tell somebody how they should feel.
Yeah.
And I kind of think that Riker was doing both of those things. And I think that's why it didn't work for me. Because he didn't ask Geordi how he was doing, really. He did earlier, but he didn't really this time. This time he came in and was like, so, here's what happened to me. So get it together. It sort of felt like. And I think that's why I had a difficult time with it. As far as your take, don't be too quick to believe what you want to believe. Yes, I'm there. That's a valuable lesson, I think, from this episode. And of course, there's what is becoming the age-old next-gen episode. It's okay if you break all the rules, as long as what you did ended up benefiting somebody.
Yeah, right.
Because because it should be remembered, what's going to go in Geordi's permanent record is not just that he disobeyed an order. He lost a starship.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
Granted, it was for these other things that said they were, whatever. But again, as you pointed out, we've actually only got Geordi's word on that because we don't even have a recording of what was going on that side, right?
Yeah.
Geordi's just standing there going, wait,
exactly.
Wait, what? You're a what? Oh, Captain, let me explain. Okay, and so I guess you can sort of put that in his record, too. Like, well, he says he saved some things that said they lived on this planet, but we'll never really know for sure.
Mission Log is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. Executive producer, Rod Roddenberry. Now, Roddenberry does all kinds of interesting things, all kinds of projects, including a podcast, or maybe 2 or maybe 3. So you can check out this show, along with Women at Warp and Priority One, all at podcast.roddenberry.com. Hey, and if you want to help support Mission Log directly, you can do so at patreon.com/missionlog. For more exciting Star Trek podcasts, you can check out Trek FM, that's trek.fm. And for the latest in Star Trek news and discussion, be sure to visit trekmovie.com.
On the next Mission Log, Gambit Part 1 and Gambit Part 2.
Some of the music for Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com, and from the album Messages by Key Theory, free to download at kitheory.com. Ladies and gentlemen, the next voice you hear will be that of a fantastic entertainer, a great humanitarian, and my personal friend, for as long as I have been active. End transmission.